have a look at the rules for this meeting. It's English for social work. Switch off your video and mute your microphone. Please write your student number in the chat. If you have queries, you can send them to me, italian@unisa.ac.za, and you CC them to ctintat@unisa.ac.za. Please complete the feedback form and the session will be recorded. Now, first of all, what is a portfolio? Because a portfolio is different from an assignment. If you want to compare it, an assignment is what you know at a certain time. Although if you write a good assignment, it takes you 2 to 3 weeks. What you hand in is a product, and it is like a photo. Whereas a portfolio is more like a video. It must show growth and in your case, it is part of your graduation requirements. So a portfolio is not something that you can decide, well, I'm going to do better in another assignment or in another module I can leave. A portfolio is an essential part of your work for your degree. And as such, it should provide evidence of student learning in practice. We are going to speak about this again when we speak about the rules for the portfolio. And then it should be a tool for measuring a student's growth, your personal development. If after you have studied a year and you are still the same person, you could have spent the time in McDonald's and it would have been cheaper. So it is, how do you grow and develop as a person? And then how, or even though you are still studying for your degree, what's proof of your professional development? Have you started thinking and acting differently? And when we look at the verbs, that specific aspect comes to the fore. So look at the rules. What I want to explain here refers to graduation requirements and evidence of student learning in practice. Professions, for instance, the law, the College of Law, social work, medical personnel, those professions have a professional body, and the professional body decides when we admit people to our profession, what's the minimum requirement that is needed to join this profession. And they decide whether a course at the university fulfills that specific requirement. So this portfolio of evidence will most probably be part of every single college or school where they teach social work. And therefore, I need to bring to your attention the rules. It is in BSW 2605, the tutorial letter 102, page 7. I couldn't find it in 1503, but I think it will be safe to assume that the rules count for them as well. There's a big problem if the professional body is no longer satisfied with the curriculum of a university or college. And sorry, I just need to make sure of something. Yeah. When they can even come in and force the university, or in some cases some of the colleges, if they have that qualification as well, to rewrite their whole curriculum. And that has serious implications for the students doing their degree. Therefore, these are the rules. And because not only your reputation, but the reputation of your department and the reputation of the university is at stake, these rules are usually non-negotiable. So I don't know how the workshops worked during COVID, but when they were still face-to-face, I often taught at the same time as the social work students had their workshops. And you may not be absent from such a workshop. You can't fall behind with your practical work. Many of you are working full-time, or you anyway have commitments, full-time commitments. So you can't decide on the spur of the moment not to do your practical, because you won't always be able to catch up on that practical before your report is due. And there's the next one. You can't submit a report late. I had a friend who did the marking of the reports, and they get in, and then they have a kind of discussion where they decide what are they going to add to the memorandum, or what should be taken away, what was a problem. They have a discussion of the work, and then they start marking, and they have to mark at quite a speed to make the university's deadline. So yours can't be late. When you have supervision, you can't be late for the supervision or stay away. And if you have to prepare either for the supervision or the workshops, and you don't prepare, they can ask you to discontinue. And guilty of any unethical behavior. And here you sometimes you work in a group. Please don't copy. And plagiarism is a serious offense, academic offense. If you have any queries about plagiarism, contact me and I'll try my best to help you, because plagiarism is such a serious offense that you might get a final warning, or they might ask you to leave. I don't know whether you've worked with Turnitin, but Turnitin is a big database. So they will compare what you have written to books, journal articles, other reports, everything. And then they can tell the examiner or the person marking your work how much of what you've written has been directly copied from somebody else, and you haven't quoted and referenced it correctly. And if you move into red, you will fail. So please be very careful and keep to these rules. Are there any questions? I am organized. I don't need to go back to your, I can see if you have any questions. The questions must please go into the chat line where you have already entered your numbers. Joanita and Win Mandengu, will you please just enter your student number in the chat? Now, this portfolio, I can't remember, but I think it's something like 60% of your year mark. And once you've handed in the portfolio, it will be kept in the exam archives. So it's important that you remember to keep a copy of your portfolio so that if something happens, you may have to submit it again. First of all, read the instructions, and it's quite a thick, dense reading. Read through the instructions and then underline all the imperative verbs, the instructions. I'll explain that to you later, but words like discuss, justify, substantiate, it's important that you underline them as you are reading through the instructions. Make sure you have the right stationery. I see they give you quite a definite instruction to put it in a file with dividers. If that's what they want, it's part of your professional attitude to follow that instruction. Then there are documents that letters that you need to send to various officials in order to have the official stamp on your any work that you do at the institution to verify that you have done your practical work. Print out those documents and try and have a copy of them and keep them tidy so that it looks professional when you put them into your portfolio. And then, as you read through your instructions, construct a timeline of the order of events. It sounds like a stupid a tip to give you, but they give you the instructions with the documents as addendums. And what's important there is that you you have to fill in the documents before you can do the observation or before you can work on the community project. So make sure that you have a timeline in which you have a right to the NGO or the institution, and then have the documents, and only then are you actually going to start writing your portfolio. So it's quite important to have a timeline, and they give indications like by May you should have done certain things, and then again by June, by July. So it's important to have the timeline. In what order do they want you to do these events? And then there are specific instructions, even to the tune of how you should be dressed for certain occasions. And remember, I don't know whether it's still true because things are far more relaxed, but I know that, for instance, to go to court, and that's one of the options that you may have, that you go to court with a social worker. Please, if there are specific instructions like what to take or what to wear, it's a good idea to mark those with a post-it note so that the night before or the day before you can just check, do I have everything in the right at the right time, in the right place. So take time and plan the portfolio. I read through both study guides for the portfolio, and I wish I had the same kind of portfolio before I started teaching, because it's such a special occasion to get involved in your career before you start the career. Okay, now we are going to remember I spoke about the imperative verbs, the instructions. I want to pay attention to this because this counts for your, you're not writing an exam in this specific module, but you may have to write other modules, you may have to write exam. It's important that you understand exactly what each of these words mean. Justify, and there you have to look at the characteristics of a social worker, and then you have to say whether you agree that you will be a good social worker, and then you have to give reasons for it. Justify means I can give a reason. Discuss mean that you can look at the advantages and disadvantages of a concept. We're going to speak about concepts later on. In a discussion, we have more than one point of view. So, for instance, I saw there were questions about pedophiles. Now, if you have to work with a case of child abuse, you need to look at it from a legal perspective, from the emotional perspective, the economic perspective. There's more than one perception of this problem. And as a social worker, you will need to look at more than one facet. And that is what's required when they ask you to discuss. This substantiate is a verb that we use when we want the student to have a theory or an opinion or a probable solution. And then you have to give a reason. Say, for instance, you think that in the case of child abuse, the child should be removed temporarily so that the parents can get themselves together and then the family can try again. Then you have to say, why do you recommend a temporary removal and not a final removal? I don't know anything about social work. I'm just using these as examples. So justify I supply a reason. Substantiate is close to the discussion. You have looked at more than one option and you can give a reason for the option that you choose. When we explain things, there are various ways to explain. Sometimes things happen in a sequence. Because Francois has lost his job, he cannot pay maintenance. Or after Francois has lost his job, he cannot pay maintenance. Do you understand? So with explain, we have an event, a fact, and we give the consequences, or we go back and we say, why did the event happen? But do you see the difference between explain and discuss? Describe. I want to give you 3 examples. I'm now going to stay with the child abuse because that was a bit that I read in one of the study guides. If you have to discuss child abuse from a certain perspective, that is one case. Explain how child abuse come across. Can you see how you move your thinking patterns? And we are going to come back to the thinking patterns. And then describe a situation in which child abuse can occur. I see that in some cases they want you to describe, and in other cases they speak about briefly describe. Briefly is another word for in short. And there you have to look at the mark allocation. I see that they often refer you to your study guides. So the information in the study guide should also give you an idea of what is, how much information you should give. And it's important that you learn, especially because report writing is such a big part of your, not only your studies, but also your career. It's important that you learn how to write just enough. Because if we write too much, the reader gets tired and important details get lost. If we write too little, the important details aren't even there. If you can teach yourself to start looking at the imperative verbs, at the instruction verbs, if you can teach yourself to start looking at them and thinking, what is expected of me, you will see that you will immediately start focusing on the right answer. And somehow you will start reading the information differently as well. Now, remember I said that in all of these that we spoke about now, justify, you say, I have the characteristics of a good social worker, and you can give the reasons. Discuss, you can look at more than one facet of the same event or occurrence or concept. So how do I join my sentences so that they make sense? And here I want you to look and think in terms of transition words. Transition words are those words that join or link sentences and words. And because they link, they tell the reader what you think. What is the link between the two sentences? Why did this student put these sentences in the same paragraph? Poverty coupled with a lack of anger management can lead to that is when we have agreement or addition or similarity. In addition to his alcoholism, he also had a bad self-image. Now, if I want to, on the contrary, his wife held a steady job and played a role in the community. Do you see how in that kind of description of a couple, I took the reader with me through my argument? I will post this link in the chat, and it will be a good idea if you mark this link and use it whenever you have to write, because these transition words, and here you can see they still add conjunctions and prepositions, but that they help the reader, and because they will also help you, because now you have your sentences and you think, but I need to explain. Maybe I should look here. In the hope that he would find in Cape Town, he left Mthatha with the intention in mind to find work. He left. And do you see that by applying these transitional phrases, you immediately start thinking in terms of relationships between the facts? Examples where you want to support, it is important to realize that the most compelling evidence of a point often overlooked is, and here, and it will go back to where you have to explain, because thereupon, for this reason, and this one is quite important, that you indicate that now you have come to a conclusion. Because remember, your recommendation will often be in the conclusion. For instance, on balance, remember I spoke about that in a discussion, you have more than one aspect to discuss. Ultimately and definitely have similarities, but they are also slightly different. Rebecca asked, is there a specific template that we must use for reports? Rebecca, that you must discuss with your e-tutor, but usually a report is decided, the format for reports is usually decided within a profession. If you have seen a medical report, it looks a bit different from other reports. So yes, I think that either your supervisor or your e-tutor will be able to supply you with the template for your report. But I'm quite sure there will be a kind of template for the report. So you understand the importance of the transition words. You have an event, you want to link it to the explanation. Or you have a theory and you want to link it to the example. And that is the work of transition words. Listen, myself, oh no. Nothing from head office. No, you need to be able to identify a concept. I got this definition from Wikipedia, but remember in academic writing, we usually do not quote from Wikipedia. I just thought it was a quick one. A concept is defined as concepts are defined as abstract ideas of general notions that occur in the mind, in speech, or in thought. Therefore, concepts are so important because if you do not have a concept, you can't think about it. They are understood to be the fundamental blocks of thoughts and beliefs. And here I want to give you an example. These are concepts: physiological, safety, love and belonging, esteem, self-actualization. This is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. What Maslow did, sorry, I can't remember. Maslow looked at breathing, food, water, sleep, homeostasis, that is an equal being, and even excretion. And he said, those are our physiological needs. So do you see that it's an abstract noun encompassing more than one idea? He looked at security of body, employment, resources, morality, family, health, and property. And he said all of those fall under safety. My friend who marked the reports and portfolios of the social workers. She said it's often a problem that the report stays within the triangle, where it stays here. It doesn't move towards the concept. So it's important that you understand what concepts are, because you are going to think in terms of concepts. They are understood to be the fundamental building blocks of thoughts and beliefs. Can you see that first he more or less organized aspects with something in common, according to a theme? In your third and fourth year of study, you are going to work with a grounded theory. You will have to ask people, you will have interviews. Usually the interview takes the form of somebody tells you their life story. You have to transcribe it. You will have to transcribe it, and then you will have to identify themes. So somebody is going to tell you, because I was fat, people thought that I was stupid as well. And you need to recognize it as prejudice. So do you see why it's so important to understand the idea of concepts? And even now, start identifying that, because when we start looking at your work in the portfolio instructions in detail, this comes out again. You need to be able to move between the concept and the example. That question, I think it was in 1503, where they give you the characteristics or the norms and values of the social worker, and you have to substantiate that you believe in that. Do you see they give you the themes? They give you these themes, these concepts, and you have to say, okay, I think I have a solid self-esteem. And then you have to move here. And from that, you have to say, my confidence is illustrated by. Are there any questions about the concepts? Because when I work with the postgrads, I find that they often can't understand the concepts that they have to grapple with. Now, from the concepts, we go to nuances, because concepts are often so close together. And I read through your the instructions, and I want you to think in terms of these concepts. I can give you permission to unmute now. What then is the difference between values and norms? How would you understand them? You can, if you raise your hand by using that sign, I'll give you permission to unmute. It's a norm usually not to lie, and it can be somebody's value not to lie. What then is the difference between a value and a norm? Rebecca, you can unmute yourself.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
I think value is something which can be different for everybody, but it's something which you deem important, but it's not necessarily the norm of the rest of the society.
Yes, that's norms are the norms usually set by the society, but a value, it is, if you're on your own, you still have those values. If we look at values and prejudice, because often people do not distinguish, and one sees it especially where you have differences around sexual behavior. What is the difference between value and prejudice? Unita, you can unmute yourself. Rebecca, do you have an opinion, or is your hand still up? Unita, what do you think? What's the difference between values and prejudice?
Now I actually want you to explain it to me in detail, because I don't have actually a answer for that. Value,
Okay.
the difference between the two of them.
Okay. It may be my value to not be promiscuous. I'm going to use, because that's now when I'm prejudiced, if I know somebody has lived with their husband before they get married, I can decide they have no morals. Then I'm prejudiced, because can you see that you get in prejudice, you get the word judge. I prejudge somebody on one piece of information. Then I'm prejudiced. Whereas, as Rebecca said earlier, a value is something that I decide is important, and that is a rule that I want to keep to. Just need to make sure. Okay. And then they tell you to do the portfolio for self-development and self-reflection. What is the difference between those?
I think self-development is actually you need to tell yourself I can do something independently. I can how can I say, like think for yourself, and like do things
Yes,
independently. And self-reflection is you must actually think out of the box, because you actually how can I say, so Lisa, you starting on your own, you independent, and by doing that is like you figure out things for yourself.
Self-development has the emphasizes development, which means a kind, at least, improvement. So remember I said, if you are still think the same at the end of the year, then you should rather have gone to McDonald's. So what we study improve or changes ourselves. And then self-reflection means I am self-aware. If you think, I don't know if you are in 1503 or in 2605, but there is a mark allocation for self-awareness. And reflection is what we see in a mirror. I can look at myself, and like when I look in a mirror and I can decide I'm going to wash my hair or put on other lipstick, I can look at myself and decide I need to do something again, or I need to do it differently. Now, the next one is very important because you have in both those portfolios, you have to do reflective thinking and you have to do reflexive thinking. Have you thought about the difference between those two?
Not yet.
Not yet. And
Not
you,
yet.
Rebecca? And you, Rebecca?
Yes, yeah, I have a bit.
What is the difference?
I think reflective is just to look back on something, to look back and think about it. And when it's reflexive, I think it's more looking at yourself.
Yes. Reflexive is based on introspection.
Yeah.
I think of myself in a situation, I lost my temper. I have the ability afterwards to say, I shouldn't have lost my temper. I should apologize. Reflective thinking, and they ask you, do you think you have the characteristics to become a good social worker? Can you see that is an example of reflexive thinking? When you do the report, it is reflective thinking. You're thinking they had, there's one where you have to observe a community and be part of group work. So you have to look at the group, how the group was managed, and think, if I have to take the leadership here, if I become the leader of the group, will I do something differently? Unita, you can mute yourself. Okay. So do you see that if you read, and at this stage, I want to go with you to, I am going to choose this one. Look at the self-awareness. Describe yourself in 3 words. It looks like those things that you find on Facebook. And then, do you see how they give you, discuss your reasons for choosing social work as a career or a profession, and that is your instruction. The rest of it is what they call scaffolding. So the examiner turns from an examiner into a guide, and he or she gives you advice on how to answer the question. And remember, I said right at the beginning, read through the portfolio. And this is a reason why you have to read through your portfolio. In answering this question, ask yourself how you came to this decision about your career and life. He or she, let's settle on she. She actually forces you into the reflexive thinking mode. For example, what were the influences of your background, present circumstances and experiences, observations in your own community, and your personal values when you decided to become a social worker? So, if you answer that, you have your reasons for choosing social work. Remember, I said discuss refers to an answer in which you mention more than one aspect. And do you see here they have different aspects. If we go back, here, do you see why you would need these transition phrases to write that specific answer? And then here, with reference to the 4 basic professional social work values, do you subscribe to these values? Justify your answer. If we go back to this model, somewhere in your book, you have these as 4 values. And now they expect you to say, what is that in you that meets up with those values, those concepts? So now we move to conceptual thinking. Because basically, do you understand that being a social worker, and whether it is that you do your report, your portfolio, or whether you are out there saving lives and helping people, that you are in a profession where we do conceptual thinking. let's go back because I think this is something that we share. You must have done Maslow's hierarchy of needs as well. You know this theory. You are the social worker at a school where you have to work with different children. Do you see that you have to understand this concept, these concepts? And you have to see how they are realized in this child's life where you are becoming involved. So for instance, that you understand esteem. You see this child has little confidence and no self-esteem. Do you see that now you move to how can I help him to improve his self-esteem? So the practice of connecting abstract, disparate ideas to deepen understanding, create new ideas, and reflect on past decisions. If we go back to that imaginary child with a low self-esteem, previously you have encouraged him to start playing cricket. But it didn't work. It didn't fit in with the cricket team. So it didn't help his self-esteem. But you understand and you have this feeling, but I need to help him. And then you ask him to start helping you with the filing. And he can do that. And because he feels safe with you, he gets the courage to go and offer to do the filing for a drama club. I'm now really writing a book here that I don't think should be written. But do you see that conceptual thinking has the ability to think about past decisions, and we create new ideas. And if I combine other theories with Maslow's, I take different ideas and I connect them, new ideas, new decisions. I can hear you speak, even if, are you doing 1503 or 2605? Which of the two modules are you doing, Unita?
I'm doing 1503.
03. And you, Rebecca?
Also 1503.
Okay, that makes life easier for me.
Yeah.
150356. Explain why, in your opinion, you are a suitable person for the social work profession. Again, she puts you in the reflexive mode. Critically study your answers in the previous question. Can you see? She tells you to go back and look at past decisions. and ask yourself if you have these required characteristics. How do you, am I now? How do you view or define yourself? And what are the characteristics that a social worker should have? And here she forces you to look away from yourself. It's more important. Now you need to recall information. But do you see how your thinking processes must adapt to the the imperative verb? And how you have to change your thinking pattern to suit the question. You can mute again. Unita, you can mute. I hope by now you understand that why it's so important to become aware of the different ways of thinking. Now, when you start writing, structuring a paragraph, if we go back to this one, can you see there's a paragraph, there's a paragraph, there's a paragraph. So, and when you write your report, the same rules apply. In fact, the same rule applies. It doesn't matter what the module is. Structuring a paragraph. Your topic sentence. Look at your paragraph and say, what is the main idea to convey in the paragraph? Followed by an example. For instance, if your main idea is that a social worker shouldn't steal, how do I illustrate my main idea? A social worker often works with money entrusted to the NGO. Why does this example illustrate my mind? So she should be honest, she shouldn't steal, because she often works with money from an NGO linked to the main idea. Therefore, if she can't be trusted with money, people won't trust her with their private matters. This is now a very bad example, but I think you can see. And do you again see how important it is to move to the transition phrases? Because the transition phrases help you to link these sentences. Any questions about structuring a paragraph? We have our topic sentence, main idea. We have our example, why that is an example, and we end with a link to the main idea, and in the case of an essay, often a kind of introduction or a hint about what's going to happen in the next paragraph. In the example I have given, I've only had one example, but if you go back to this example here, yeah, let's take this one. Describe yourself in 3 words. Now, can you see that the influences more than one here. So when we look at the structure of the paragraph, you can have more than one example, but each example must be explained. And then we need a kind of final idea. When I worked with another class, I explained to them that an essay is like a necklace, and a paragraph is like a bead. And these transition words keep the beads together. But in your case, where you have to have your paragraphs, the paragraph is the necklace. Your sentences are the beads that make up your necklace. And therefore, you need the string to keep them together. And those are the transition words. And that, I had an Afrikaans class last night and I said, fluit, fluit, my story is uit. Do you have any specific questions that you want to ask about the portfolio now that we've gone through it? You can unmute yourself if you want to ask a question. Yes, Unita?
I'm actually thinking of task 3, where they say about basic communication skills. Then 3.1, they say you must attach assignment 2. What does that actually mean?
Basic.
Basic skills.
Oh, remember I told you to keep copies of your assignments. And for task 3, you have actually already done task 3. That was your assignment 2.
Okay, so you just need to copy and paste.
Yes. Control F. Essay type question in which you that allow you to reflect on your studying towards becoming a social worker. And again, if you reflect on your studying towards becoming a social worker, it is the reflective thoughts and your suitability for a career in social work. And it counts quite a lot. It counts 20% towards the final mark of this module. But then you simply remember you need to mark. You need to submit. I get the idea that you make a physical file which you then send to them. And that you give them, I suppose, a copy of the assignment that has been marked.
I think we can't send any hard copy material anymore this year. So,
okay, so you need to submit it electronically.
Yes.
And then it's simply a case like Rita says of copying and pasting.
Yes.
Any other questions about it? I feel I've spoken a lot and you haven't really spoken a lot. Do you feel that at least it helps you a bit? Because especially the structure of the paragraph, it's so important that you get into the habit of writing like that, because that's more or less the prescribed structure across the modules.
Yes, it does help. Thank you.
If you have any written work, you may submit it to me. I look at the grammar, and then there are also a few very practical, logical tests that I do on the written work that usually should help you as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Now, ladies, are going to make the sexist remark. You have no time to prepare the food for tonight.
Mine's prepared already.
I ate this off. I ate lunch, so mine's ready as well. Or I've had mine as well. And then there are no more lectures booked for you, but feel free to contact me if you have problems with any. I'll try and help.
Thank you very much.
Okay. And good luck with the portfolios.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.